Hello and welcome to Senior Voice. Today we're going to start a series of topics that are current in our worldwide news. And so sit back and listen, and hopefully your mind will be stirred and you can put in your 2 cents with whoever you're with at the moment. Our topic today is the present situation in the Ukraine. And Carol, you expressed some concerns.
Well, I did. When we had our hour-long discussion, we did talk a little bit about history, and I guess I'll ask Bernie to repeat some of that. But the thing is that at that time, there was this like gut reaction that I was having, like, oh no, here goes the Cold War again. And the Cold War, when I was growing up, meant you worried about nuclear war. Okay? And I'm thinking, this can't be right. So since then, we've had the vote on Crimea, and now we're increasing our sanctions against Russia. But I don't have enough knowledge of what sanctions can do to harm us, to harm Russia, or get them to change their minds. Up until now, Putin has said he really doesn't appear to care about them. So I don't know where we're going, and I just feel a little unsettled, more so than I did with other international crises. Yeah, so...
Well, you know, a country the size of Russia is too important to the world for us to be putting sanctions on them. They have a lot of raw materials that the West needs and Europe needs, and for us to be approaching it this way, I think looking at it, Crimea is itself, they speak Russian, they had a vote, they wanted to stay with Russia, and Russia went in and set up, they already had their main base there, so I don't know why we're putting such pressure on Russia to get out of Crimea when the people want them there.
But the main base was not there until they made the invasion, right?
Oh, no, the base has been there right along.
No, I thought it was a Ukrainian base, and they went in and...
No, it's a Russian base, and that's where the Russians have their Mediterranean fleet.
Oh, well, they were both, because there were Ukrainians entrenched in some sort of base.
And the Russians shipped their oil out of that base to countries in the Mediterranean.
But where is the base? In Crimea?
In Crimea, yes. And
But the Ukrainians also had their base there because the Russians surrounded them.
Yes,
after
they did.
After the crisis arose, they went in and surrounded the Ukraine barracks, right?
yes, yeah.
So, you know,
Well,
they were kind of looking like insurgents to me.
Yes,
Yeah, you know,
yes.
so how do you react to that?
Well, now they were reacting to the fact that the Ukrainians, that in the main part of Ukraine, they took a vote. Now, half of the people in Ukraine speak Russian, and the other half speak Ukrainian, which is a language very close to the Polish language. They're all of Slavic origin. So, if they took, and of course the main thing is that the person who was the prime minister of Ukraine happened to be a Russian, and he was living in the Russian area. So when the pressure came on him, it was just almost a walk to go over, and he is now living in Russia. So, but they've elected a new president who was going to be who is actually in the western side of Ukraine, and he's pro-West. The big thing is that Putin is, he wants to keep the Ukraine in his sphere of influence.
The whole Ukraine.
But the Ukraine, the whole country, wants to join in with the Europeans.
So it's a very unsettled
It's
situation
a very
all
unsettled
around.
situation.
Yes.
I think not only the Russians have a lot of oil, which is up in the Arctic, but they also have most of the world's titanium. And titanium is something they mix with aluminum to make extremely light, strong metal
Whatever.
products,
Yeah.
which they use mostly in airplanes.
I don't think.
So, you know, they're very strategically set right now.
Yes, yeah.
What did you say? You don't think?
I don't think that the sanctions that we are supposed to be proposing, that the U.S. is thinking of putting on the Russians, has any real value anyway. It has to do with freezing some financial assets of some Russian diplomats in this country, and something else minor that's not going to affect Russia really. I think we're just going through the motions, because we know there's just nothing that concerns us and nothing we can do about it.
Well, it does concern us because we're the leader of the sanctions. And yes, we've had sanctions against other countries, but not against Russia, the big power, so to speak. And did anybody else have that gut reaction I did about the revival of the Cold War?
Yes.
No?
yeah.
No, I didn't.
No,
Oh, okay.
No.
Good. I
No,
can
but-
sleep a little better at night.
no, but what it reminded me of was that I still remember when Hitler annexed Austria. And well, they were Germans, they are German-speaking people. And of course he was born there, but so he felt he was okay to annex Austria. And once he got done with that, then he annexed parts of what today is Czechia, used to be Czechoslovakia, in the northern part where there were lots of Germans living. I remember there were resorts, Karlsbad and some other Bad, which Bad means bath.
Yeah.
Karlsbad, and so he annexed that, and then we know what happened. Now, the question then would arise: is Putin going to annex
Well, the rest of the Ukraine.
Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania? At
All
one
in that
point, they were
region.
part of the USSR, actually.
Well, you do have some justification for that because Hitler did have, he took over Austria by vote. They voted him in.
Well,
So there is that possibility. But
and
times have changed.
Crimea
It's not the
voted-
same.
Crimea voted the Russians in.
And they've only been a part of the Ukraine for what, 30 years maybe? Or?
Well, since,
Well,
no,
maybe-
more
maybe
like
50,
60.
50 or 60,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, World
Yeah.
War II, I think, wasn't it? Wasn't that the Polish rehabilitation area when they were derived of the eastern farmland
yeah.
region?
Yeah.
Yeah, and my history on that is vague, but I
Yeah.
think that's how it developed, and so it became Russia, so to speak.
The Russians didn't withdraw from Poland very far.
No.
And they held on to the Ukraine and Georgia, and there was other countries. They just released them, well, since Gorbachev left.
Right.
What's that, 20 years ago?
About
So,
that.
so Georgia is a separate state now, and that was
Yes.
during Putin's lifetime.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
Do you think he's going to go back and try and
Oh,
take
I don't
it?
think he can.
So what
no.
makes him think he can do the Ukraine?
Partly because they're more Russian than the Georgians were.
Yeah.
The Georgians were always very independent.
Yeah, and he senses the alliance that the people there
Yeah.
wish to be a part of Russia. So I think he was building on that,
And it was back in the early 60s when the Russians, to maintain stability over the countries, the areas that they took, they really, really located even whole towns like to the eastern provinces and Kazakhstan. I had some students come to the school I taught in, and blonde hair and blue eyes. And I said, your appearance doesn't coincide with what I would expect coming from Kazakhstan. And they said my parents were
Russian.
relocated there during the dysphoria that they had. So they were manipulating the population all during that time.
It needs a lot of study, I think,
and
to understand.
The thing is that I'm
area.
not getting upset because I think it's a family squabble. And to me, you don't get into family squabbles because when you do, they patch it up, and then you're
the one
at
that's
fault.
the villain. Yeah.
Besides, I know, are we the guardians of the world?
I don't know. Some people look to us as if we were, and I wonder if we're just interfering too much in other places, and yet we can't ignore human rights issues as we stepped into some countries in Africa, but we have not stepped into all of them where there are problems.
But that's not the issue, I don't think, in the Crimea or in Ukraine.
Right, right. But we talked about guardians of the world, and I think that's very hard for us to get an understanding of what we want to do, because we want to support democracy, and that's what they were rebelling for, is democracy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that allows us to step in, does it? I don't know.
I think so, because it's it's human rights and it's civil rights, and we say that we protect that around the world, and the people's right to vote. But a lot of this is following the Olympics, and I always felt in the Olympics, which I thought were very well organized, that our television and our broadcasting were very quick to make criticism of everything the Russians did. And I think that hurt them. Because any reports we got from them, they were trying to prove that they had done a great job with the Olympics. And we didn't give them the kind of press, for instance, that we gave England, when we were saying, oh, isn't it wonderful how they did all this in London, and it's going to be ready and everything. They weren't any more ready than the Russians were, or the Canadians, or even we were, to get it open on time. So I think it, and Putin was there all the time. I was hoping actually that our president would have gone over and made an appearance at the Olympics just to show goodwill. But that wasn't going to happen.
Well, there's an interesting piece in the current Time magazine. This land is my land.
Yeah.
That's the headline. Russia, Crimea, and a return to old world order. And they say at one point, so what has Putin done? The Russian leader has used geography to his advantage. He has acted, in other words, according to geopolitics. The battle for space and power played out in a geographical setting, a concept that has not changed since antiquity, and yet one to which many Western diplomats and academics have lately seemed deaf. But the truth of it seems to be that's what he has done, according to Time magazine. It makes really good sense. All he has to do is what he was doing, moving troops, setting them down, ships in the lake, and there he is.
In reality, does anybody have any sense with the Ukraine and their loss of Crimea at this point? Is that going to be a huge economic blow to the country?
I'm not into information in that regard. I don't know. It would be something that we would need to research, I think. You know?
Well, I think it is on the Black Sea or the Caspian Sea. Caspian Sea, I guess.
Sea.
And that is their route to get to the Mediterranean. So that in itself is their contact with
The Western world.
the wealth of the Mediterranean. So this, I think, would hurt their economics quite a bit.
If we did what?
No, just the fact that
but-
Ukraine has lost
Yeah,
Crimea.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
That's kind of an interesting point. that may be why they were fighting so hard to
Yeah.
keep it when the people there did not necessarily want to stay with the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Um,
I had a teacher one time who always said, "Follow the money." Follow the money, and you'll find out what's
That's-
going on.
Hey, on all those TV shows, it says, follow the money, follow the money.
That's
So,
for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing. And maybe that's why, you know, in some places like Syria, where we're having such devastation and internal struggle, and we can't identify who's in charge,
No.
we couldn't really identify who's in charge in here yet either. We don't get involved, although we are now beginning to.
And they, the Ukrainians, have been working hard to join the European Union,
Yeah.
Right.
and they saw Greece joining and the benefits. And to join the union, they have to bring their country up
To a certain
to
level.
a certain level of infrastructure and a form of government, and meaning polling stations for elections and things like that. So they've been trying hard to get that established. Now, of course, it's all canceled, and they've got to pick up the pieces later. But the Ukrainians and the Poles are related by language and by what do you call that? Diet?
Culture?
Diet, or what am I trying to say? Cooking.
Cooking.
Cuisine. So, you know, they're not going to give up any contact there, I don't think. I go to basics. What are the people? What are they doing, and what do they want? And that's going to be the determining factor.
It's true. But you hope it's not going to turn out like Syria, because that, to me, is catastrophe. You
Yeah.
know, the
Oh, that's,
rebellion, the lives that have been lost,
Yeah,
Right.
we
the
never should have
destruction
allowed
of,
that.
of properties. You know, you just hope it's not going to come to anything like
I
that.
did. I actually wrote a letter to the president shortly after this started. Should I say this on TV? I said, you know, you can stop this immediately. We have ICBMs that could hit a dime from outer space. Put 2 of them down his smokestack. And he won't be around tomorrow.
And then World War III.
He didn't take my advice.
I'm not surprised, Bernie.
But that is an awful situation there. I mean, you see those little children out picking weeds out of the along the road to eat.
For food, yeah.
And I mean, these are people who are not used to that. They're used to working and having a proper
Right.
diet
They have
and
pride in
being
yeah.
you know, dressed properly. Just consider what would happen if we had to go out and pick up for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember going up here in Windsor, going to the river with a Vietnamese, Laotian actually, and from the time we got out of the car until we got to the river, he had picked up a salad.
Right, right.
And I said, you know, what are you doing with the weeds? And he said, oh, this is good.
Food.
And then he showed me he had watercress, he had plantain and wild escargot. I mean, it was amazing what's growing out there wild
just
here
ignore.
in the United States. And of course, we go to the market and pick up the better kind.
That's true.
Yeah.
But prepared.
So, but here are these children out there having to do this, little ones, so scantily
where is
clad. I'm thinking of my grandchildren. It's just awful.
Where is this, Bernie?
In Syria.
Oh, in
In
Syria.
Syria.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I
switched
see.
gears on you.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
I remember that
Yeah, I'm
was-
thinking.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's minor relationship. But if we're doing the sanctions here, the Hartford Courant had an article about the impact in Connecticut, and are we prepared to cut back on our comforts? If
Because of
the
them.
sanctions, yes, and it's
Yeah.
going to make
It's
a
always
difference.
it's always two ways.
Yeah,
You know, it's
right.
always two ways.
Certainly gives us a lot of food for thought, and it's worth, you know, pursuing and following, I think, to hopefully achieve the outcome
Yeah.
that would be a success for everyone, particularly the people in Crimea,
Yeah.
you know.
And like your comment on Syria, they don't have oil in Syria, but they have the oil pipelines going through Syria, and they get an amount of money from
A bonus type thing.
on that, or there's another word
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, there is.
Tariff.
A tariff,
A tariff, you're
a
right.
tariff for having that go through there, or they just turn off the spigot.
That's right.
So it's, you know, we need
We
those
have to safeguard
people.
it.
And we see already, what is our gasoline's almost to $4 again.
Yeah.
So that can go on even more.
That's true.
Well, I think that this is something that we can read about, we can stimulate our minds and our conversation, and I would encourage everybody to think about this and to talk to somebody about it. There's nothing more deadly than sitting home and just accepting what's going on around you and not thinking about it. Because I think, particularly for seniors, but for anybody, you need to keep your mind active. You may not have any answers. You may not have time to research what you want to research to get a better conclusion for yourself. But I think that this whole idea of keeping your mind active and understanding the world situation is very good.
Right. I think it does bear following up, you know, and keeping abreast by reading and being informed, and hope that for these people in the Crimea that it will come to a good outcome, you know. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But I think we should keep ourselves informed.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's another one of those situations that, yes, it doesn't affect me directly, but it's still a part of our world, a part of our life. And it could along the way, yes.
Well,
And we're definitely, you know, we're no longer United States. We're no longer a little country or even a city. We are part of the world, because you can take your cell phone out, or the rest of the world are using satellite phones. Take out your phone and call anybody, anywhere.
Anywhere, right.
Even in the villages in Africa, they have phones.
They have them.
And they may not have a car to drive, but they have a phone. And you can talk to them and say, but I don't speak Ebola or whatever. But you touch a button and it'll translate it for you. I mean, it's that close now that we have, we are actually citizens of the world now.
Right, we're global citizens, we're not Americans.
And we've got to be concerned about other people.
So being a global citizen is takes a whole new way of thinking.
Yes, it does, definitely.
You were concerned about your family 50 years ago. Now you're concerned about everybody.
Your world.
I think.
So true.
But so the question is Ukraine going to remain independent, or is Putin going to try to cut out the section where it says Russians?
Well, in that case, I don't know what % of the population he'd be taking and how that would work. But I do know that they made some comment about how much it's going to cost Russia to bring Crimea up to their standards. And that was the big motivator for the people there in their vote, was they were going to get more money and more security.
Yes.
It was not the Ukraine.
But the United States will offer them more money.
You think so?
Only if they have a dictator. We seem to give money to dictators to give to their people, but they never get
They never get it.
Never get
That's the problem. We're just too generous.
I'm very cynical about that foreign aid.
Well, I think we've enjoyed our discussion this morning. It's certainly been an eye-opener for me on some points, and I hope it has for you, the people out there watching. And do keep informed. It is important. Sometimes we are too complacent. We just sit back and let it all roll by. But it is important to keep informed.
Yep. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Pauline Martin. Thank you for joining us at Senior Voice. Have a good day.